Welcome to Taking Care of Lady Business, where we put the business back in lady business. Hosted by Jennifer Justice, founder and CEO of the Justice Department, a management strategy and law firm that works with female and woke male entrepreneurs, executives, talent, brands, and creatives to build and maximize their wealth, focusing in the areas of tech, consumer product, finance, media, entertainment, and fashion. Jennifer interviews entrepreneurial women who have done it all, who will be sharing their secrets on all things business, especially as a woman. These highly successful women will share strategies and insights, including what not to do and what it takes to win. And now, here's your host, Jennifer Justice.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Taking Care of Lady Business. This is exciting. We have today Anjali Kumar, who is the founder of Slightly Reserved. Anjali and I actually go way back, not so back, but back. She actually was a part of the Justice Department for a small period of time until she discovered that she no longer liked to practice law. And we will hear all about what she's doing now, what Slightly Reserved is. And welcome, Anjali.
Thanks, JJ. It's so good to see you and hear your voice and all the things.
I know. See, even though we were like 2 blocks away from each other right now.
I know. The pandemic has other plans. I know. Damn COVID.
I know. So Anjali, tell us, you're like a Renaissance woman because you do a lot of different things and you've had a lot of different career paths. And I would love for you to talk about how you started your career, what you're doing now, and then your pivots and why and how you thought of them, because so many people get stuck in what they're doing and think, okay, this is the only thing I know how to do. And also that's internal, and externally as women, we're always put and pigeonholed into the things that we have done, right? Like there's all this evidence that like men get hired on potential, women on experience, and like how we get around those things. So let's first talk about Slightly Reserved, what that is and what you're doing.
Sure. So, Slightly Reserved is really just an umbrella for all the projects that I'm doing. So, as you said, I'm doing a lot of different things. And before, when I would have to say what I was doing, I felt like I had to list them all out. And now instead, the shorthand is just like, oh, I have this company. It's called Slightly Reserved. And then all of my nonsense can kind of go under that one umbrella. And so it feels like it's contained in one nice, neat package. But it's still a little bit of everything, a little scattered, but to me, it makes sense in terms of the kind of common thread is it's stuff that I'm interested in. So I advise a bunch of companies. I would say kind of half are tech or meaningfully tech enabled with a focus on fintech. And then the other half are really D2C brands and brands that I love. So I've been joking that it's sort of things that make women feel good. It's just, everything from CBD and cannabis to spirits brands. You're definitely seeing a theme there to, beauty and wellness companies that I really like. So it's kind of a nice mix of products and services aimed largely at women, but people identifying as women or people who love women, all those things. So that's the main part of what I'm doing. And they're all really early stage startups, kind of seed to pre-series A seems to be the sweet spot.
What do you mean by advising for people who don't understand what that means, or, have you companies that don't have advisory boards? Like, what does that exactly mean to them? What do you do on a basis?
It's really kind of CEO whispering because it's so early stage. It's really depending on the founder, and it's really become like where I'm a buddy to the founder and somebody that they can call with whatever is going on. So similar to what you started at the Justice Department or what we'd started, back in the day, and the early sort of idea around that of just advising companies that we believed in and that we felt didn't have access to people like us until much later stage. But I found that getting in earlier was a really fun place for me to be because as an operator, I was always being brought in much later in the company's history, more around the Series B or C when they could afford to hire someone like me.
Mm-hmm.
But then at the earlier stage, I'm able to, help prevent mistakes or help them think about things differently or think about partnerships or, introduce them to people that they might not otherwise have access to just because of the roles that I've had in the past prior to this.
Right.
So it's a real mixed bag, it's everything under the sun, and it's just being a thought partner, a friend, like someone just to talk to, but importantly, in many cases where I'm not an investor. So I feel like people can be really raw and vulnerable with me in a way that maybe they wouldn't be if I had put a bunch of money into the company.
Right. That's true. All right. So how did you get to the point where people would want to hire you? Tell us a little bit about your past, and then we'll get more into what Slightly Reserved does on top of that.
Sure. So I, had a bunch of different roles over the past 20 some years of my career, largely as a lawyer. So I'm a practicing attorney. I mean, even though I practice very little right now, but I still have my law degree. So I've been practicing for over 20 years. I started at a big white shoe law firm, New York-based law firm, but out of the London office called Sherman and Sterling many years ago. So I worked in the London office, Paris office, New York office with Sherman. And then post 9/11 had a bit of an epiphany that I didn't want to do that anymore. And I really wanted to save the world. So to me, that looked like at the time going to Robin Hood Foundation. And so I went in-house to Robin Hood, not in a legal role, but more in an advisory role to grant recipients. And then from that went on to Acumen, another nonprofit, as the general counsel. And then from there, I was recruited to Google. And so I spent a number of years at Google as an attorney working on basically anything that made Google money in North America. So everything from ads and ads technology was the big part of my practice. But I worked on the YouTube integration. I worked on mobile ads, on data related stuff. I worked on the ill-fated Google Glass project at the end of my tenure. So I had quite a range of things that I was exposed to during my 6 years there. And then from there was recruited to be the general counsel and head of social innovation at Warby Parker, which just went public a few months ago. And then spent a few years there in those roles and really built, that company with the founding team to, it's a pretty steep inflection point. So that was a really exciting ride to be part of. And then I took a year off to write a book and then went back into full-time work in a GC and chief people officer role at Cheddar, which was later acquired by Altice. And then left that to co-found the Justice Department with you in early days. And then left that to kind of hand the reins back over to you so you could take it to your full vision, which is so fun to watch. And then, kind of do this stuff on my own. So I was advising a lot of tech companies, a lot of, smaller startups, earlier stage. And I found that I really liked playing in that space, as you said, sort of more than the legal space, but still doing a few legal work, like small legal clients too.
Right. So that is there's so many pivots in there, and there's so many different, I guess legal is part of a lot of those threads. I mean, you go in and out of it, right? But so many people think that when they start a career that it has to be kind of linear, or once you start a specialty. And I used to think that, having not had any kind of mentors in my life or anybody who had gone to college, that it was this I needed to figure out by the time I was 17, 18, what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And that's just not true. You have so many things and twists and turns that can happen. And maybe there's a specialty or certain hard skills that you learn, but what was in your mind, or you telling yourself when you were doing this, that was oh, I can quit this job and go do another thing? What helped you to understand and navigate through these different kinds of roles?
Yeah, well, the thing is, I always had the next thing lined up. So it's not like I was just throwing caution to the wind and being I'll figure it out on the fly. I was pretty conservative. I mean, I'm a lawyer by training. I'm risk averse by nature to an extent. But I think when you think of the average lawyer, perhaps I'm more risk taking.
Yeah.
And I do think that was a muscle that I developed over time, because I realized, I think 9/11 really put it in perspective, because I was a young lawyer at the time. It was so new, and the world was turned upside down as far as I was concerned, right? I was probably a fourth year associate when that happened, and everything just completely changed in the city. I was living a couple of blocks from the World Trade Center. I saw the whole thing happen. And I think I just realized that, everything had turned around so quickly. What am I waiting for? So that became a big driving kind of thing for me.
Right. So passion and purpose, which I find women, that's when they really start thriving in their careers, is when they have that passion and purpose behind what they're doing.
For sure.
The luxury of that, right?
Yeah. I mean, a huge luxury. And I certainly acknowledge that, having, a dual income household certainly makes it a lot easier to take some of those risks. But I think for me, they were always pretty calculated risks, and it wasn't like me going to four guys in a garage at a startup with no income or anything. I was always when I went to startups, they were well funded by the time I joined, because I was joining as a general counsel or a C-level employee. So they had the money to pay me by that point. So it wasn't as risky as it might seem. I think I just wasn't scared of closing the door behind me of whatever I was leaving. So I was willing to kind of walk through it and say, okay, like leaving the law firm, for example, okay, that closes off the door of becoming a partner at that law firm. But I was really comfortable with that decision. Like I wasn't like on the path to becoming a partner at the law firm, I don't think. And that wasn't my goal. So I was comfortable with what I was closing and willing to kind of walk into the unknown of going to a nonprofit or what have you.
What about like the skill set, it's like not thinking women also thinking that they need to know 130% about a job versus like, it's not like, you were Google, we all know Google because we use their mail and, the search engine and, docs, but that doesn't mean, glasses like Warby Parker, like how, what, like that transition, what made you like know that you could do that job?
Well, I think it was that I realized that nobody else really knew what they were doing either. So when I went to,
that's the key. And that's what I want so many women to understand. Like nobody knows. Like when people used to say to me, like, you've never been a president before, when I wanted a president job, I was like, neither was Obama. Okay. Yeah. So like,
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. I heard this great interview that a friend did with a gossip columnist, and I'm going to mess up his name. I think Rob Shooter is his name. And he tells a story of that he keeps his Bible on his coffee table, and it's the Sarah Palin biography. And he says that whenever he's doubting himself, he puts his hand on his Bible, the Sarah Palin biography, and he says, if Sarah Palin had the audacity and the confidence to run for the second highest office in the land, I can get onto Entertainment Tonight and spend 3 minutes talking about Kim Kardashian's bottom, with confidence.
And I know Rob Shooter.
So I don't know him. I just heard him on a friend's podcast, and I was dying. And I was like, I need to get a copy of that book or whatever my equivalent is of like, if Sarah Palin has that confidence, why am I worried about being the general counsel of an eyeglass startup? Like I can handle this, It's like it's a bit of that.
Yeah.
So get yourself a Sarah Palin book. It'll drive up her number.
Oh my God, that's such a great like gift, right?
Right.
Like,
we're all going to
confidence. Here you go. Unfortunately, It's a woman. Let's think of an example that's a man, but yes.
Yes. We'll think of somebody else. But there's plenty. Ross Perot, like what was the beleaguered self-confidence that became that presidential campaign? There's plenty of examples.
Yes.
But just the idea of that was so funny to me. And I think that sort of thing has been a driving force of like, everyone else doesn't know what they're doing either. When I was at Google, it was early days still, and nobody knew what they were doing. Like we were all like, people were kind of making stuff up as they went, and everything was so new, right? Like YouTube didn't exist when I joined, and a year later it was the biggest content creation platform in the world. Like it suddenly became this massive thing. So what did they know that I didn't know? I could figure it out. Now obviously some of those things are different and people have deep expertise, but I think it just made me realize if I know a bit and I can kind of anchor myself in something that is rooted, I'm not like completely making it up, that I'll be fine.
But it's also, being okay with making mistakes, and not being perfect.
Yeah.
Which is another complex, a lot of us have. And so my daughter is just like that. Like she needs to be perfect. And I'm like, how do I let her know? Well, Jack is just like, whatever, you know what I mean? And it's like, how do we teach, girls and women, like, you don't have to be perfect. It's okay.
Yeah. I mean, Reshma Saujani wrote a whole book about it. I think you're right. It's such a muscle that people have to work. And I think we really have to unlearn that pressure. I luckily did not feel that pressure so much, clearly by some of the decisions I've made and some of the wrong turns I've taken. But that you feel embarrassed or, like people are watching you or saying something. And then you just kind of realize like, honestly, nobody gives a shit. Like nobody's waiting for you to fuck up. Nobody is waiting for you to mess up. And like, everybody's busy with their own stuff. Nobody's sitting and paying attention to what you're doing or not doing that much. And like, you can figure it out as long as you try. I mean, it's, if you're different, if you're not putting effort in.
Well, yeah, of course you have to put the effort in, ish, like,
Ish.
You're already probably doing more than men in your day anyway. So let's be real. All right. So you went to Warby Parker, and then you end up in Justice Department, all this, and Cheddar, and you got to Slightly Reserved. So what else are you doing there? You're advising companies.
Yeah. And so I would say the majority of my time is spent advising, a dozen companies in various iterations and various stages of what they're
Mhm.
dealing with. But again, pretty early stage. So a lot of my time is just spent talking to founders and founding teams. And then doing some limited legal work, as I mentioned, for just folks that I can't say no to. So folks like the Me Too movement as a client. Like if
Yeah,
Tarana Burke wants me to read her contracts, like I will do that. She's
of
doing
course.
God's work. I'm happy to
Yes.
read her marketing agreements. Like it's fine. So I will pull out my legal pen and sharpen it, for sharpen my pencil for that kind of thing. And then the other stuff I'm doing is a lot of creative or, sort of hopefully creative stuff. So I wrote a book, which you know about, obviously, Stalking God, My Unorthodox Search for Something to Believe in, which came out 4 years ago,
That's
crazily enough.
crazy. Yeah, like
Yeah,
in
it's
January.
nuts.
Yeah, so now it's 4
Yeah,
years ago.
exactly four
Yeah.
years ago. And did a TED talk about it. And there's been some television development opportunities coming out of that. But you know better than me that that life cycle, that development cycle is on its own
Yeah.
time space
Yeah.
continuum that's
Oh
not
my God.
rooted in anything I'm used to in the startup world,
Right.
where you have an idea on a Monday and you execute on Friday or you kill the idea. And that is not my experience in developing this content. But it's been really fun just to think about what it looks like,
And
in
growing that.
different.
But
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
you do a lot of investing and angel investing and helping
Yes.
women in that. So can we talk about that? I mean, I think that that's an area that so many people want to know more about, and understanding how you evaluate who you and who, like what kinds of things you invest in, what do you look at, and what that really means to the founders.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to unpack there. And I think the reason I started doing it was because I was finding that I was so close to so many deals that ended up making all the guys a ton of money. I mean, you know the story. It's a story as old as time, JJ. Like you know
Yeah.
this as well as I do. And and it was starting to piss me off because I was like,
Yeah.
are you serious? Like I was in that room too with the Uber founders, and I met him, and why didn't anyone ask me to put in $25,000? That would have been worth billions by now. And it just never occurred to me that that was even an opportunity. I didn't know that everybody else was doing it. I had no idea. And so once those opportunities started coming to me a little bit more obviously, I think that really when I was at Warby is when I started hearing more about that. And to their credit, Neil and Dave, the co-founders, were definitely letting me know when they heard about little things to be like, hey, you might be interested in this deal. And, we're putting a little money in it. Like they weren't representing, the founders, but that they would have access to things just because they were founders and they were pretty plugged in. And so that's when I started kind of working that muscle and getting the confidence to put the money out and like be like, okay, this is sort of legalized gambling. Like I can try this. And the first couple of deals went well. So from that, more opportunities come to you because then you seem like you're really smart. You really know what you're doing if you get a couple of lucky bets here and there. And so that's how I've been thinking about it. But as I've started spending more of my time as my investment, I've started really holding back my financial investments to the founders that I think really need me on their cap table, whatever that might look like. So mostly that ends up being women of color, just like where my name would actually be meaningful. So that's probably most of where I'm putting my money. And then there's a handful of folks I'm kind of like, I think they might hit it pretty big. I wouldn't mind putting a little bit there.
Right. And you know what everyone needs to understand is you don't necessarily need to have a ton of money to do it, right?
Yeah.
Like I just saw something where you were putting together an SPV.
Yes.
Can
Yeah.
you
This is
talk
my
a little
first
bit?
one.
Yeah. Can you talk about that? I mean, so look, that's great. Look, you've had all this experience and you're just doing an SPV and you've invested many. So can we talk a little bit about that? Like, what is an SPV? I like to get down to like, I think vernacular is something that's really intimidating to women. You know my story about dry powder. Everyone who listens to this podcast knows this story about dry powder, how I didn't know what it meant. And it was like, when I found out what it meant, I was like, oh my God, I'm so stupid. It's so stupid to have even these terms, but like, what's an SPV? What does it do? And how does it like help when you want to put in smaller amounts of money, all of them?
So it's exactly for that purpose, so this is my first time doing it. There's definitely people who are far more fluent in the vocabulary and sort of the mechanics of SPVs. So take this with a grain of salt and definitely listener, do your own research and find people who know more.
SPV stands for special purpose vehicle.
Correct. That's as far as I know. Yeah. Okay.
No, I'm just letting everybody know. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was like, wait, am I wrong? So, basically me and another woman, Archana, are co-leading an SPV for a company that we're really excited about, called West by East. And they are custom bridal for the South Asian market. So we both happen to be of South Asian descent. It's a problem that we can see serving millions and millions of customers, because it's something that we both experienced when we got married, however long ago. So it was a really interesting company that solved a unique problem from our perspectives. And so when we were thinking about the kind of folks that might be interested in investing, they were sort of the bigger folks, or the more seasoned angel investors who might be more willing to put in a bigger check. But there are a lot of folks who might be customers of a company like that, for whom this might be their first investment. It would be a really great one to do because they understand the problem. So I'm thinking of, in particular, South Asian women. And so we decided to put together an SPV where we'll raise up to a certain amount for their overall raise. And people can put in smaller checks of 5,000, 10,000, 1,500, whatever they want to put in. There's fees associated with it that the fund manager will take out of, not just us, but it's really a company that kind of does all the logistics and back end for us. So there's fees associated with that, but it's a great way to, again, sort of work the muscle of investing. And it's hopefully an easy one for some folks that might otherwise have never invested, but because they understand the business and they understand the problem that's being solved, I think it's a really good one for folks to start with for that particular customer. So that's how I'm kind of thinking of SPVs personally, of when I might consider leading one.
And what's the company? You got to plug it.
Yeah, it's called West by East.
What do they do?
It's really great. They're South Asian bridal, but custom made to measure. And they're, with the influx of this capital and doing some tech builds and like smart factories and stuff, they'll be able to get the turnaround down to a week. It's incredible.
So how do you do it? Like with your phone or something? You do your
so you do the measurements. Yeah, you do the measurements on your phone. You do a style consultation with one of your designers. You custom design whatever it is that you want, for whether it's your wedding outfit, for your bridal party, for your mom, for your sister, whoever's coming to the wedding. Because in South Asian culture, often it's not just the bride. So first of all, weddings are a really big deal in our culture. There's multiple events. So you're not just getting one outfit for the bride. It's like usually a couple. And then it's the entire bridal party. So it's the groom, or the other bride, or whoever, it's whoever the person's marrying. And then it's the family members. It's, a lot of other people for multiple events. So one bride is potentially, 25 outfits. Like, wow. It's crazy.
Right.
Yeah. It's a big
And so they have this technology as well, which is like,
yeah. So they're making everything in India, but they're trying to pull out some of the pain points through tech.
Yeah. So what are some other kinds of what are some other companies that you're invested in now or advising that you can talk about, promote here, that are interesting to you, that you see that, people should know about, et cetera?
Yeah, well, there's a great one I'm excited about out of India that's pretty early stage, called Just Bop. And it's not really Clubhouse, because it's more mass than Clubhouse. It's more, they're doing something that they're calling audio shots. And, for such a large population, it's a way to actually, what I think is interesting is that they potentially are creating an incredible audio library of local languages, because there's so many languages and dialects spoken in India, that if you can capture some of that for AI purposes and actually create other tech based on that, I think it's super interesting. But it's really just a way for people to interact through these kind of short audio clips that, like, if you said something and I wanted to respond to that I do that via audio versus like a comment on the thread. So they're pretty early stage and doing some cool stuff, but aimed at the Indian market. Who else am I excited about? There's so many. I'm really excited about all of them. Oh, there's a company called Kin, co-founded by Jen Batchelor and Bella Hadid. And it's a beverage company, kind of adaptogens and all that kind of good stuff, brain health and yummy stuff too, but an alcohol alternative. I'm pretty into that.
I know of this one as well.
Yeah, yes. Kin Euphorics, it's called.
Kin Euphorics, yes.
Yeah,
amazing. And it's out, right?
So yeah. They've been out for a few years.
Amazing. And then, so when you decide to do these investments and you're like, what kinds of things are you looking at?
It's mostly the founder. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really, well, I would flip that. It's actually the idea first. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. It intrigues me. But then it's really all about the founder because the idea will pivot, the idea will change. And I really want to take a bet on the founder.
And see if they can like follow through on it, or like, what are the like qualities that you're looking for?
I think somebody who's actually really, really excited about the idea and that they're not like a solution in search of a problem, that they're really creating something that's meaningful and that has a real purpose, not necessarily in the big grand purpose way, but like that there's a reason that this tech or product needs to exist and that it's filling a need that's really there.
Right.
That's the biggest thing. And that they're the one to do it. You know, that there's something interesting about that founder, to their background, to, you know, their passion around that problem, that they're really going to kind of focus on it and get it done. And now just kind of move on to something else in a couple of years. That basically that they're not like me. I want somebody who was not, you know,
Right.
like I moved from things to things. I
Well,
want somebody who's like eyes on the prize and wants to see this all the way through.
right. That's not going to like waver from it.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
Yeah.
Well, that might not have been you had you
Right.
had founded a certain company, right? You never know.
You never know.
You never know. Well, didn't you just do some spices or something? Didn't you do some
Oh, that was just for fun, for charity. Yeah, I did a collaboration with Spicewalla out of Asheville, North Carolina. It was actually just a fun project that was born out of the pandemic. So Zia, my now almost 12-year-old, and I, obviously like everybody else, were cooking a ton. And she and I had come up with this spice blend that we kept putting on everything. And it was a combination of everything: bagel seasoning, chaat masala, which is like a tangy, savory spice used a lot in Indian food, and Kashmiri chili, like a hot chili and some salt and some other stuff. And because I just kept putting it on stuff, when I was talking to the team at Spicewell, they're like, oh, we can make this for you into a thing. So it just became a joke. So I made all these little tins that we called Anjali's Everything Good. And I was going to send it out as like client gifts and that kind of thing, and just like as a funny little gift to family and friends. And I posted it on Instagram. And then people started DMing me being like, can I buy it? I was like, well, no, but I actually had like 50 tins of them in my basement because I had to order a minimum quantity.
Yeah.
And so little Zia is like going to the post office and like, you know, mailing these out. And people were like Venmoing me $5. I was like, please donate it to charity. Like, don't give me money, but just, you know, sending out the tins so that they weren't like collecting dust in the basement. But it sort of took on a life of its own. So then I developed a cocktail salt, and we did both of those in collaboration with Spicewalla for a charity. So all the proceeds.
You know the Spicewalla people, or you were like just reach out?
No, I reached out. I was actually trying to source things for a holiday gift. And so I wanted to get like small batch spices from them. And initially I was just going to put together a little kit of theirs. And as we were talking, they're like, you know, we should do a custom blend together. I was like, what? Like, you would do that? And they're like, yeah, that'd be so fun to do with you. And that's how it started. So I did the custom blend instead of the little 3-pack I was going to send out to people. And then it turned into this. But yeah, no, I'm not starting a spice company. Nobody has to worry. But I do like doing it. Yeah, maybe I might come up with, I have a third idea in the works. So we'll see.
Amazing. All right. So we've gone over pivots. We've gone over you advising. We've gone over you investing. We've gone over you making spices, a TED Talk. I was very right. You're a Renaissance woman.
Thanks,
so there's a lot going on. And of your advising companies, are those the ones that you were just talking about, or are they, you know,
they're a mix. I think all the ones I mentioned, I'm an advisor to.
Okay.
All of those 3. And then there's a handful of folks like Pomp and Whimsy, which is a gin brand that I've invested in.
Gin brand, female
yeah,
gin brand.
Female founder for gin brand.
Great branding.
A wine company.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, it's lovely. If you were going to try, that's a good one to try. Unfem, it's a wine company.
Yeah, Jen
founded. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So a few folks like that, but yeah, I would say, there's like a nice mix. There's a longer list.
Yeah. You invest in what you imbibe in, and then
exactly. Exactly. And then I advise tech companies because they can't ingest.
It's like what I'm teaching my kids how to like do this. They have that green light card and they have an investing account. And I was like, okay, what do you use all the time? Okay, what do you invest in that? And then recently Netflix, just like completely like the stock went way down, and Jack's like, what's going on with Netflix? And I'm like, you're 8. Okay. Like I'm
I love
losing
it.
money. I was like, it's $3. Okay. Like,
It's so smart to teach them though. You're so smart.
well, I don't know how good I am at teaching them, but it gives them like, abilities. So
Yeah.
anyway, they're dabbling in all of it. And it's like way more than I knew 5 years ago. They
And
know.
I mean, Nico's going to have her own NFT soon if she doesn't already. I'm
I already tried to
surprised that
talk to her
she's,
about it.
yeah, all her artwork. I feel like that's NFT ready.
Yeah, it's a big commitment though. It's a big commitment. Amazing. So thank you for all of this. It's been amazing. There's one question I ask every single person though, before I let them go on with their day. And that is, and I know women always have a lot of answers to this. What's the worst advice you've ever received?
Oh, that's a good question. The worst advice I've ever received. This might be a weird answer, but it would be to follow your passion. And I think that's because I spent so much time early in my career being really stressed that I didn't have a passion and I didn't know what it was. And so I felt like I wasn't doing enough. And so I was kind of like waffling and feeling like, inadequate, that I wasn't accomplishing the same things that as those people who had their singular passion and just followed it to the exclusion of everything else. And then, so I think that was bad advice for me personally. I think if you have a passion and you can follow it and make it your purpose and make a bunch of money at it, that's amazing. But that it's also okay if you're a little bit late to find it
Oh
or if you're
yeah.
still searching. So
Well,
yeah.
and it could change, right? Like,
Yeah.
and it can change for different reasons. Like what I cared about pre-kids versus after having kids is totally different.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Like pre-kids, my passion was like Gucci, Lanvin, and Alaya, you know? Then afterwards, I was like, yeah, maybe I can save the planet a little bit more. And maybe I could like, make sure there's no pay gap, so Nico has the same opportunity as Jack. But, like follow, like whatever you should do, be true to yourself and know that if you're not following your passion in your job right now, that just keep your eyes open, I think though, too,
Yeah.
keep your eyes
Yeah.
open to it. But yeah, you can't just like, I don't know who it was. There's I don't know, one of these guys who gives a lot of advice, somebody famous who was like, oh, I know, it's somebody from like Andreessen Horowitz. I think one of those guys. It's like, you can't just follow your passion when you're 18, because that means you just be drinking beer and like, watching sports all day. And I was like, well, that's a very good point. But at some point you do have to marry, like, if you want the world to be a better place, like what you're doing and spending your time doing all day should also make you money and have some passion. Like it's possible.
Agreed. I think it's absolutely possible. But I think what I mean by that is that if you haven't found it yet, that's okay. Like be patient with yourself. And like you said, like maybe follow your curiosity instead and see where that takes you. And maybe that turns into
you definitely followed your curiosity. So that's great.
That's
curiosity.
been my
I mean, I
mantra.
think that's a really great thing for everybody. I mean, I look at my kids and they're so curious and ask 1,000 questions all day long. And I'm just like, God, when did I lose that?
You didn't, JJ. Definitely not.
A little. Anjali knows me better than most, so you're just being nice. Thank you so much for taking this time. I so appreciate it. Let's make a plan to see each other in person soon. So people want to find you. How do they find you?
On the internet, you can just Google Anjali Kumar and that should pull me up. But yeah, Instagram and Twitter at Anjali Kumar.
Those are your main things. Thank you everyone for tuning into this episode of Taking Care of Lady Business. I know that you got a lot out of this. I know I always do with Anjali. She makes me smile. So thank you. Let me know what else you guys want to hear about. Until next time, I'm Jennifer Justice.